executive order one 4168. As well as Daniel 11:40 to 42. First, we want to understand where we are in our history. So we have, I'm only going to stick with the 144,000 line for right now. It is not straight. I am sorry. I will not be drawing straight lines. I apologize. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm very new to this tablet. Okay. So we have 2024. So we're lining up 1989, 2001. Sunday law, close of probation, and second Advent. Now, we've been learning the different models for the progressive nature of the Sunday law. We have the model of the three Romes. And so first is pagan, papal, and modern. And so we learn through these three Romes that pagan Rome, we learn through these three Romes how they come to power. So pagan Rome works from 64 BC. '63, 31, to 330 AD. So this tells us that the East is taken down. The glorious land, and Egypt. And then there's a ruling for a time. Everybody follows that. We've gone over this a lot, so hopefully it's easy to follow why I'm doing this. The papal Rome, we have, I'm just going to use the names, not the dates. We have the Heruli, Vandals, and I'm just going to put Goths because it's easier, shorter. And then we have a ruling for 1260. So we have two models that show these powers have to be overcome before the Rome of that time can rule. So for modern Rome, we know that in 1989 to 1991, King of the South was taken down. Then we have the National Sunday Law. The glorious land has to be conquered.
You lost your screen up there.
Lost this.
Carry on.
Okay. So this is 2024. And then, so we're putting, what would we put here? Who's conquered during the nationals?
The glorious land.
Who? I heard somebody over.
The glorious land.
The glorious land is conquered. And then after the National Sunday Law, what do we have? Worldwide. Don't know when this is yet. And what must be conquered here? Egypt? The world. Now, there was a presentation that Parminder did a while ago. Illustrating that the King of the South is defeated at 1989. King of the South is also defeated 2021. And so if it's defeated as King of the South, but yet we still see evidence of Putin, then we think the King of the South is still alive. When there's discrepancy, we know that we have to dig deeper. So if the King of the South has dealt a deadly wound, I'm going to depict that with X's over the eyes and a frowny face. Good job, Shaman. And if the deadly wound that happens in 2021, we're trying to answer now, when does that death happen? Is the death how Elder Tess had taught it? At the National Sunday Law? Or, as we're starting to know more of the Sunday Law studies, is it at the close of probation or the worldwide Sunday Law? I am not going to be answering this. Merely pointing out this is where we are right now, answering this question. If the King of the South dies at the National Sunday Law, then how Elder Parminder taught it was that Russia as a country would fall into the category of the world. Questions about that? Because I know it's a weird concept. Is everybody able to understand how that's possible?
Please repeat the question.
King of the South dies. And how I saw that is that the contest ends. The struggle between the King of the South and the King of the North becomes nothing. There's no struggle anymore. And that's why I saw it at the National Sunday Law when Trump won. However, there's other developments as well that other teachers have done. So I'm just setting that aside. We're not going to answer that. Because we see there is struggle right now. When Trump was elected, no struggle. Presently, there's struggle. There will continue to be struggle until the end until the close of probation, until the world is conquered. So what does this conquering look like? The conquering of the glorious land. I think we can also call this the sixth kingdom. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So the conquering of the glorious land, what does it look like? And we're going to first look at the executive order. Unrighteous decree, as my friend Olivine would call it. Now, Executive Order 14168 we can see by examining just this one, there were dozens of executive orders passed January 20th. His first official day in office. The current administration issued dozens of executive orders. This one, and Parminder sent out a list of all the orders at some point fairly recently. As I was reading the list, this one in particular stuck out. So I'm simply going to read the title. Defending Women from Gender Ideology. Oh, let me start over. Just read the whole thing. Okay. Defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. What does that mean? It sounds so foreign, so alien. Defending women automatically implies that women are under threat. From what? Gender ideology extremism. What did they mean by this? If it's extreme to be, let me rephrase. So gender normalcy. If we have gender extremism on one hand, what are we going to have on the other? Louder?
Normalcy.
That was my, other words can be used, but yeah, normalcy was. So what did they see as normal, not extreme?
Two genders. Biological. Two genders.
Two genders. Okay. So two genders. are mandated, are required. So no more seeing gender as a spectrum. So if we have male and female as the normal, as what they're holding up as normal, as to be, for there to be only two genders in the official wording of the administration, what does that do to people who identify outside of male and female?
They don't exist.
What do we have besides, if there's an idea that gender is only binary, male and female, then on the other hand, we have to acknowledge that gender is on a spectrum. And includes intersex people. Transgender. And non-binary. When only two genders are officially recognized, when the national government says the only people it will recognize are male or female, what does that do to everyone else?
Dehumanizes.
It dehumanizes. What does it do to their rights?
Demolishes it.
Yeah, it takes away.
Carol says down. They don't have
They don't have it.
they don't have any rights. This is Carol. She did this. You all know Carol from France, so. The depiction of those outside of the binary genders as there being something wrong with them. That it's just in their head, they need conversion therapy. The government isn't allowing them autonomy over their own bodies. Who else is the government doing this to?
Women.
I hear women from the audience here, and I would say that's correct. Yes, Christine said women. I would agree. Women are also being, their rights of bodily autonomy are being removed. So I'm noting that we lose bodily autonomy.
It's pretty clever.
We lose the ability to say what we want about ourselves. We lose the ability to tell the world who we are. What we want with our body, what we want to be done with our body. And instead, the administration is telling the people what should be done. Christine, were you going to say something?
Just said it's pretty clever with one executive order, women and trans and non-binary,
Yes.
everyone loses bodily autonomy.
So Christine says that this is interesting with one executive order, women,
Trans.
women and women and transgender are losing their rights. So I'm going to, what time do I go to? Just for time reference. 12:45, okay. So, going to read a few things about this executive order. So instead of reading this verbatim, I'm going to paraphrase. So this order makes sure that sex is used instead of gender in all official documents. So this illustrates what we just talked about. When you speak of sex being male and female, you eliminate the ability for a person to express a different gender. For decades, this is known as gender dysphoria. And gender dysphoria is a protected disability by the US government until now. So now the US government is saying that there's no such thing as gender dysphoria. You are no longer able to claim medical need for change of gender. If you were born a biological male, there's no more identifying as anything other than male. If you're born a male, you can no longer transition to a female. Vice versa. And there's no ability to be recognized as they. There's no more non-binary they pronouns. The word le, they, there's no more plural singular for a person. Now you have to, on all official documents, have your birth gender listed. The sex you were assigned at birth. The visa has to, your international, your passport, your visa has to say the gender, the sex you were assigned. If you are in prison, you can no longer undergo your transitional therapy. So trans females must be in male prisons. Vice versa, trans females are now, well, anyway, I forgot which one I said. And there's no federal funding anymore for transitional care within the military. In fact, there was another order the administration issued officially banning transgender people from the military service. This is possible through the Attorney General changing how a court ruling in 2020. Now, so there's a court ruling in 2020 that's now being changed through this order. So through this order, the Supreme Court is being asked to reconsider a court case from 2020 Bostock versus Clayton County. And I find it worth noting that this was 2020. A lot of sorry, keep going. A large anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ movement started in 2020. So what the Bostock versus Clayton County case allowed for it allowed for gender discrimination to be protected, for people to not be discriminated against for reasons of their gender. So with this now being under threat, this court case now being under threat, it works to change a Supreme Court ruling, the law of the land, for how non-binary genders are accepted in employment and in society. Okay, so this also says that all wording in all federal documents have to remove gender pronouns. Everybody has to be male and female.
The Bostock was for protection, right?
For protection.
Was for protection, and then the executive order is not.
Yes, so Bostock versus Clayton County was to protect the rights of LGBTQ. This executive order seeks to remove those protections. There's a lot of pushback on this executive order. Resistance, yeah. But so far, a lot of laws have already been passed. A lot of them are being enacted. That discriminate against women and LGBTQ. So in 2020, there was a large anti-LGBTQ movement uprising. And I find that interesting because that was the year of, let me go back to the line. Because within here, we have 19 and 21. And the increase of knowledge of our increase of knowledge of 19 was 2020, and that was May 25th, 2020. What happened that day? George Floyd,
Yeah.
the death of George Floyd. And we mark this as typically what in the counter-revolution? The beginning or the ending?
The end. The beginning,
The beginning of the counter-revolution.
because it lit the fire.
The interesting thing that also happens at that time is the counter-revolution to the counter-revolution.
Backlash.
And this is when MAGA begins their anti-LGBTQ their activities against women and LGBTQ individuals. Now, I go back to the background to this executive order has its, we can trace it back to 2020, but specifically to 2023. Where Donald Trump signed the Presidential Promise to American Women. This was presented to him by the Concerned Women for America. So this group of concerned women, what are they concerned about?
Trans people.
Trans people. So these concerned women form a legislative pledge. And this is where they give the Trump administration the language for this executive order. Stating there's only two genders. Only women can be mothers and bear children. And the president will protect safe spaces, which I find an ironic term because where do we usually hear the word safe spaces being referenced?
Protecting the minorities, the trans.
The radical left usually had created safe spaces for students, in particular in college. Radical left. Of course, the radical left is what the right would call it. So for safe spaces to be called woke by the right, so the left, we're creating safe spaces for people in college and employment. And the right, we're calling them snowflakes. Like it's a slang derogatory term meaning flaky and sensitive. They break and melt. That's a snowflake. So now for the right to want safe spaces, are they going back and saying that only their safe spaces are not woke? I don't mean to pit one side against the other. Simply getting us to think getting us to think about their wording. So now they're seeing that a threat from these trans individuals against women why would women need safe spaces? They obviously feel threatened. Because they're seeing that a trans woman isn't a woman at all. She's a man and deserves to be in the men's rooms. That trans woman loses their autonomy to their own person. And they're now being defined by another group of people. But women are supposedly under threat from these individuals. So their locker rooms, bathrooms, prisons, domestic violence shelters, healthcare, education, and women's sports must all have biologic women only. This is what Trump signed into presidency his first day in office. The Concerned Women for America considered Trump's executive order a fulfillment of his presidential promise. In other words, this is why he is in office. So if we can take this as a blueprint, And, okay, I'm not going to read those. If we can see this as a blueprint and now make application to what the world is going to be seeing. Then we have a better understanding of what's coming ahead. We already see the agitation of it worldwide. There are many countries, in particular Africa, that are pretty excited about this wording, this concept. In order for all of the world to be under the two-gender rule. Any questions? Okay, so in summary, we looked at the three Romes. We saw how pagan, papal, and modern Rome all have three obstacles to overcome before ruling supremely for a time. We get this language through Daniel 11:40 through 42. So we have, I'm going to write in the margins. Oh, sorry. So at 1989, 11, Daniel 11:40. At the National Sunday Law, we have Daniel 11:41. And at the Worldwide Sunday Law, at the close of probation, we have Daniel 42. And this is where we see that Egypt belongs to the world. All the countries are what are being spoken of at Daniel 11:42. So we've already overcome in Daniel 11:40, we've overcome the king of the south. The glorious land has been taken by 41. And the world by 11:42. To plot out the rest of Daniel from 11:42 to Daniel 12:1. I have no doubt will be covered by someone else shortly. Because this is the time that we're living in. So after we looked at these 3 obstacles to overcome, we took a look at how the glorious land was conquered. We used the executive order as an example where it was mandated that only male and female sex be acknowledged formally by the government. Which costs non-binary and transgender people their personhood. This is what we're seeing play out now. In the USA. So we can also see it here before we see it in the world. And that's all. Gloria? Gloria has a question?
Could you clarify about your what you wrote there, no struggle?
So Gloria's wanting me to clarify what I meant by no struggle. So under the lines, Gloria asked, she wants more information about what I mean by the no struggle. What I meant is that the king of the north has conquered the king of the south without war. The king of the north says one thing, and the king of the south doesn't fight back, doesn't challenge, doesn't say no. Gloria?
Are you marking that at the national Sunday law?
So that's part of the question that we're answering as a movement now. When does that happen?
Because in 2021, they did have a information and a hot war.
So repeat what you...
In 2021, they did have an information war and a hot war, going back.
But the USA wasn't at hot war. Oh, sorry, to repeat. So Gloria, yeah, so Gloria was saying that in 2021, there was an information war and there was a hot war. But not directly. The USA wasn't directly at war with Russia. Trump is friends with Putin. They're not enemies. That's what I mean by no struggle. Because we do see struggle. Right? Putin is pushing back a little bit now. But there's there's not an outright struggle.
So, in Arjun study, Aaron study,
Okay, Gloria?
so with Arjun study and Aaron study, they're looking for a peace treaty.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts there?
I think that fits. So Gloria is saying, sorry, yes. Gloria was saying with Aryan and Aaron studies, that they're saying that there's a peace treaty that will end the war, the conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south. And I think that is in agreement with the death coming at the close of probation. If we have the glorious land being conquered July of 24. And then all the rest of the countries, which include whatever's left of Russia, come into agreement at the close of probation. What that looks like, I'm not exactly sure. Okay. Thank you, Gloria. Okay. Anybody? Anything else?
Alyssa?
Yes. Curtis.
This is a question not about what you just said, but about your study as a whole.
Okay, Curtis has a question about my study as a whole.
The executive order, did that say there are only two genders, or did it say there's no such thing as gender?
He's asking if the executive order says only two genders, or that there's no such thing as gender. And both. They say that there's only male and female, and they call that sex. They say that gender ideology is made up, is fiction. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Somebody else?
Andre?
Oh, yes, Andreas. My blind side, sorry.
I need the microphone.
Just speak up.
Okay. So my question is in the context of the concept of the King of the North conquering the glorious land.
Okay, so Andreas is asking in the context of the King of the North conquering the glorious land.
That if we go to the literal story,
Okay.
that if we go to the literal story, the King of the North is being used by God for a purpose.
If we go to the literal story, we see God is using that kingdom for a purpose.
Which is, sorry.
Okay.
And that purpose is in the context of the sins of the glorious land.
And that purpose is in the context of the sins of the glorious land.
So my question is, in the context of this,
Okay?
so my question is, in regards to the executive order, what do you see the problem with the glorious land? What is that problem that now the king of the north is here to punish the glorious land for?
Repeat that.
Yeah, so in the context of this executive order, which is around the king of the north conquering the glorious land, what was the problem with the glorious land that's being addressed?
Okay, so what is the problem with the glorious land that it was conquered and that's being addressed right now? So Andreas is referencing the study where the administration is being used by God. As a hammer to punish the people that were that sinned. Kathy, yes. We're at time. Sorry, Andreas, I can't answer.
No, but we can now talk about it at lunch.
Okay, so very quickly. Because we didn't codify, we didn't put into law these protections for LGBTQ and women. We didn't put into law that women and LGBTQ must have the same rights that men are guaranteed in the Constitution. We came close with the 14th Amendment. But even the Equal Rights Amendment failed. So the current administration, this executive order, is an example of the hammer. Okay, we'll close in prayer. Thank you, everyone. Loving Creator, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the ability to come together and study. To learn what it means to be wise. Be with us the rest of this camp. I ask this in Jesus' name. And I thank you and your Holy Spirit for all that you do. Amen.